Good morning, students. In this session, we'll discuss the topic biotechnology principles and processes. Okay, so we'll have a brief synopsis on this particular topic, principles and processes of biotechnology. So, what is biotechnology basically? It deals with the techniques of using living organisms or even enzymes from various organisms to produce different products and even processes which are useful to human beings. Okay, and if you take the example of many processes like IVF, okay, leading to test tube baby, synthesizing a gene, using it, developing a vaccine, DNA vaccine, or even gene therapy, these things are all included or they are parts of biotechnology. So when you come to the definition, the EFB, that is European Federation of Biotechnology, has given one definition which comprises both traditional and modern molecular biotechnology. And what is the definition we are well aware of? Integration of natural science and organisms, cells, parts thereof, and molecular analogs for products and services. So this is one basic definition of biotechnology. Of course, there are many others available. Okay, any living organism you apply any technique for some product, that is itself biotechnology. So when you come to the principles of biotechnology, children, we know that modern biotechnology basically is dependent on two principles. So what are those two principles? The first one is genetic engineering. So what is genetic engineering? It is nothing but it is defined as the direct manipulation of genome of an organism, and it involves the transfer of new genes to improve the function or trait into a host organism, and ultimately changing the phenotype of the host organism. Okay, so when you manipulate the DNA, when you manipulate the genes, ultimately that process itself is called as genetic engineering. And the second principle is nothing but maintenance of sterile conditions or sterile ambience in the surrounding. Okay, and this is very important in chemical engineering process because it enables growth of only the desired organisms or maybe pro or eukaryote. Okay, in the large quantities in fermenters. Okay, for production of various products like antibiotics you say, vaccine you take, enzymes you take, etc. Okay, now coming to the basic developmental principles of genetic engineering, children, we know that one concept we are aware of, that is called as traditional hybridization. Okay, so what is this traditional hybridization? We have studied in some other chapter. Okay, where you are combining the desirable traits between two different parents. Okay, let it be plants or animals. Okay, and this traditional hybridization used in plants and animal breeding experiments lead to inclusion and multiplication of undesirable traits also along with the desirable traits. Okay, this is all very very important. Okay, it includes also the undesirable characteristics or undesirable features or undesirable genes in the organism. And the techniques of genetic engineering, which include creation of rDNA, okay, that is a recombinant DNA, or cloning and even gene transfer, will overcome this limitation. Very important. This will overcome the limitation wherein you will be introducing only the desirable set of genes without any introduction of undesirable or unwanted genes into the target organism. So this is one advantage of biotechnology over the traditional methods. In traditional methods, both mixture of desirable and undesirable traits are added up. Okay, whereas you can overcome this problem by using genetic engineering experiments where only a particular gene, desirable gene, can be introduced into a desired organism. Okay, and one another concept, how you are going to do that? When you have a desirable gene with you, and if you just insert into any host organism or any alien piece of DNA, there should be some guarantee that it is going to replicate. And we know, children, replication always initiates or it begins at a particular point, that is called as ori, or origin of replication. And when an alien DNA is linked with the origin of replication, then only it is possible for it to replicate, multiply, make copies in the host organism. Okay. Otherwise, it may be degraded in the host organism itself, and the entire procedure will fail. So any desired gene should be tagged with the ori, then only there is a possibility of its cloning. So this process is cloning, as you all know, or making multiple identical copies of any desired or template DNA. Okay, and the construction of first rDNA. When you study the experiment, you can recall the experiment of Stanley Cohen and Herbert Boyer, which was done in the year 1972, children. And this was one of the first kind of its experiment of construction of first rDNA experiment as per your NCRT by these two scientists. Okay, and what was that experiment? If you just remember, the first recombinant DNA emerged from the possibility of linking a gene which was coding for antibiotic resistance with a native plasmid of Salmonella typhimurium. Okay, these two scientists isolated a desirable gene. What was the desirable gene? Which was coding for antibiotic resistance, and it was tagged or linked to a natural plasmid from Salmonella typhimurium. Okay, and this after tagging it, okay, into the plasmid, okay, of Salmonella typhimurium, this was further introduced into the host organism, that was again E. coli only. Okay, E. coli only. And one important thing here is the cutting of this DNA at specific locations became possible only with the discovery of restriction enzymes. This is very important. Restriction enzymes, also called as molecular scissors, they were available, they were discovered, and because of these enzymes only, the cutting of DNA was possible. And then the cut piece was linked with the plasmid, that is the vector, what you call. Okay, and these plasmids will be acting as vectors in various organisms, different types of bacteria, and the plasmid will provide many advantages, as we all know. We will study later, okay, in the further parts of the this particular synopsis. Okay, and these vectors were used to transfer the DNA, okay, into the host organism, and this will allow the further multiplication or propagation of the desired gene. Okay, another thing is the linking of this gene, antibiotic resistant gene, with the vector was possible also with one enzyme, children. And what was that enzyme? Ligase. Okay, DNA ligase, which acts on the cut DNA molecules and it will help to join the cut ends. Okay, and that will make the possibility of construction of the recombinant DNA or the rDNA, what you call. Okay, and when this DNA is transferred into E. coli, it could replicate using the new host DNA polymerase, of course. Okay, it uses the host enzymes, make copies of itself, and this ability to multiply copies of antibiotic resistant gene in E. coli was called cloning of the antibiotic resistant gene in E. coli. Okay, recombinant DNA technology, also called as genetic engineering, deals about production of new combination of genetic material in the laboratory, and this rDNA molecule are then introduced into the host cells where they can be propagated, as I said earlier. Now, there are different steps, basic steps in genetically modifying an organism. And what are those steps? Number one is identification of DNA with desirable genes. Second one, introduction of the identified DNA into the host organism. Third one is maintenance of introduced DNA in the host and transfer of DNA into its progeny. Okay, so these are the three basic steps, children. First is you have to identify the desirable gene from which source you want to take, whether it can be a plant source, animal, even bacteria, any living organism. And then you have to introduce the identified DNA into the host cell using a plasmid or a vector system. Okay, by using restriction enzymes, using ligases, all those things. And then ultimately you have to maintain that desired gene into the host. You should not lose it. And not only maintaining, transferring it to the next generation also is an important step in this particular rDNA technology steps. Okay, now coming to the tools of recombinant DNA technology, there are different tools like restriction enzymes, polymerases, okay, ligases, vectors, okay, and even of course a very good host organism. Okay, let us first start or begin with the restriction enzymes. As I said, also known, they are also known as molecular scissors, students. Okay, so what are these restriction enzymes? These enzymes belong to a larger class of enzymes called as nucleases basically, and we are well aware of this word nucleases. Nucleases enzymes which act on nucleic acids. Okay, they may be DNases or RNases. Okay, when you talk about them, there are two categories like exo and endonucleases. The name itself tells us exonucleases remove nucleotides from the ends, whereas endo will make cuts within the DNA molecule at a specific position. Okay, so the first restriction endonuclease discovery, if you want to read, we have to go back to the year 1963. In 1963, two enzymes responsible for restricting the growth of phages, bacteriophages in E. coli, were actually isolated. Okay, in 1963 they were first isolated, and one of these enzymes, out of the two enzymes, one of these was responsible to add methyl groups to the DNA, while the other was responsible to cut the DNA. Okay, and the second one, which was cutting DNA, was named as restriction endonuclease. Okay, and the first restriction endonuclease was HIND2, whose functioning is dependent on a specific DNA nucleotide sequence, which was isolated and characterized five. And this enzyme was later characterized 5 years later. Okay, and it was found that this enzyme, that is HIND2, always cut the DNA molecule at a particular point only, that is at a specific sequence of nearly about 6 base pairs. Okay, specific sequence of 6 base pairs, and this specific base sequence is known as recognition site or the recognition sequence for HIND2 enzyme. And children, each restriction endonuclease recognizes a specific sequence that is called as palindrome. Very important, palindrome. And what is this palindrome? We know palindromes, generally, if you take, they are the group of letters that form the same words. Okay, that read the same both from forward as well as backward direction. Like example, Malayalam. In DNA, what is palindromic sequence is? A sequence of base pairs that reads the same on the two strands when orientation of reading is kept the same. Okay, so that such type of sequences are called as palindromic sequences. An example is given here, like GAATTC, pi prime to 3 prime, GAATTC. Even if you read in this orientation also, you will read GAATTC. So there are many different palindromes, okay, which are specified or recognized by different restriction endonucleases, children. And you should know that till now nearly about 900 restriction enzymes have been isolated from over 230 different strains of bacteria. Actually, this is the data what I am telling you is from NCRT book, but if you refer to the fresh literature, the number has far exceeded 900 actually, children. Okay, and we know that how these enzymes are named also. You should know nomenclature of this enzyme. One example is mentioned in your book, that is EcoR1. You all know how this naming is given. The E here stands for the genus Serratia, the second two for coli. R here is for the strain, that is nothing but the RY13 here. Okay, RY13, and 1, 2, 3 actually designate the Roman numbers. These designate or indicate the order in which the enzymes were isolated from that particular strain. Okay, so action of restriction enzyme is shown in this particular figure, children. You can see two different DNA molecules here. One is our vector and one is our foreign DNA or the desired DNA. So you can see EcoR1 as an example of this enzyme. You can see it cuts always between G and A. Okay, on both the strands, and in this due course it produces sticky ends, which are very important. Sticky ends, these are the sticky ends. What are sticky ends? Sticky ends are those which always have single stranded extensions. Okay, there are two types of enzymes, restriction enzymes, one that produce sticky end, another that produce the blunt end. Okay, so EcoR1 is an example of enzyme that produces sticky end. Like if you want to take blunt end, SMA1 is an example which produces blunt ends when cutting the DNA molecule. So here, when the sticky ends are produced, these are very easy to join. Okay, because they are definitely complementary to each other, and this joining is done with the help of enzyme DNA ligase. So you can see a recombinant molecule here. Okay, only a part of vector DNA is shown here, children. Actually, if you take a plasmid, it will be circular like this. Here it is shown. You can see this is the vector DNA. This is the foreign DNA. Same restriction enzyme you are using, and it is always favorable to use the same restriction enzyme because same type of sticky ends will generate. Okay, or we can understand that, and it will be easy for ligases to join this foreign DNA to the plasmid, ultimately producing the rDNA, and this rDNA will be later transformed into the host cell, specific host cell. Like E. coli usually is the preferred host among the prokaryotes, which later will maintain this recombinant DNA and also will transfer the rDNA to the next progeny cells. Now, when you do this procedure, one important thing you have studied in this chapter, that how you are going to separate and isolate the various fragments. Okay, so isolation of DNA actually is a different procedure, children. That is there in the next part. We will discuss that. But separation of DNA means once you isolate the DNA from an organism and once you cut it by restriction enzyme, you get different size fragments there. Actually, how you are going to separate these fragments? Okay, how you are going to do that? There is a technique that is called as gel electrophoresis. Okay, and as per your syllabus, agarose gel electrophoresis is mentioned. Okay, agarose is a suitable medium which is used here, which acts as a basic medium for the transfer of the DNA molecule. Okay, and what is the principle involved in this? particular method is negatively charged DNA. We know it has a negative charge always, okay, because of the phosphate groups present in the backbone. And this negatively charged DNA fragments can be separated by forcing them to move towards the anode. So you can see the diagrammatic representation also of a typical electrophoretic unit here in this particular figure. So wells are shown here, students, and here you are loading the desired DNA molecule. Here you are loading the DNA molecule, okay, and DNA is allowed to move towards the anode. Actually this end is anode and this is the cathode end. So DNA is allowed to move towards the positive electrode here. And another thing is movement of DNA basically depends on its size, okay. The various fragments move according to their size through the sieving effect which is provided by the agarose gel. As I said, your agarose is a medium here which has small pores, actually, children, and which will be visible only under microscope, okay. And the porosity, it depends on the percentage of agar you use here, okay. Higher the percentage you use, the pore size will be smaller, and vice versa. So here you are loading the DNA molecule, they are allowed to move under the influence of electric field, and hence this process is called as electrophoresis. And the separated fragments, okay, can be visualized by staining the DNA with a stain that is called as ethidium bromide, and you have to follow, and this should be exposed to UV rays. Important thing here which is missed out here, you have to understand that once you are staining with ethidium bromide, these things should be exposed to UV rays, and under the influence of UV light, the separated bands will be appearing as orange color, okay. They will be appearing in orange colored bands in the ethidium bromide stained gel when exposed to the UV light. And another thing here is the largest bands will be towards the wells and the smallest bands will be towards the anode. That means smaller DNA will move faster and larger DNA will move slower, okay. This is one thing we all know. And once you separate the bands from the, like how once you separate them based on their size, how you are going to take them out, means how you are going to collect them back, is the procedure is called as what? Elution. So what is elution, children? Elution is nothing but separated bands of DNA separated from the agarose gel and extracted from the gel, okay. And this process is called elution, and the fragments will be purified in this way and later will be used for constructing the rDNA. So this is called as agarose gel. Moving ahead, now we have to see about the different vectors, children, cloning vectors which are mentioned in your book. So what is a vector? A vector is basically one which allows the multiplication or replication of the desired DNA molecule, okay, because it definitely has an ori. Apart from ori, it also has some other desirable traits, okay. So which vectors are commonly used is plasmids and bacteriophages are commonly used for vectors for cloning, okay, in bacteria, children. In bacteria, these are the most two common vectors which are employed. Why? Because they have ability to replicate, as I said, okay, independent of the control of chromosomal DNA. And bacteriophages, because of their high number per cell, have very high copy numbers of their genome within the bacterial cell, okay. So there are different criteria which we will see now, so based on which you are going to select a vector. So first and foremost the thing here is origin of replication, children. So origin of replication, also called as ori, it is the sequence we know from where actually replication begins, and any piece of DNA which is linked to this sequence can be allowed to replicate, okay. So this sequence is responsible for one more thing, that is controlling the copy number of the linked DNA. Very important point here. Not only it allows replication, it also decides how many copies of the desired gene can be maintained within the cell, okay. So that is called as copy number of the particular vector. And as mentioned earlier, bacteriophages have their high copy number, plasmids also have high copy number. Some plasmids will have high copy number and some plasmids can be present in few, that is only 1 to 2 copies per cell, where others can exceed even 100 per cell. So depending upon that, you have to select, always remember, you have to select a vector with high copy number, okay. And another thing here is selectable marker gene, okay. So what is this selectable marker gene, children? Selectable marker is nothing but it helps in identifying, eliminating non-transformants and permitting the growth of only transformants. Very important point here, okay. So what is transformation? First of all, you should know transformation is a procedure through which a piece of DNA is introduced into the host bacterium, okay. And Here, what is marker gene doing? Marker gene is helping you to eliminate the non-transformants because it expresses some character there. The gene will express and gives you some hint that this cell is a transformant and the other one is non-transformant. Easily you can eliminate or get rid of non-transformant. So this function is done by the selectable marker gene. And normally you should know that the genes which are encoding for antibiotic resistance, like it can be ampicillin or chloramphenicol or tetracycline, etc., etc., they are generally used as selectable markers in genetic engineering experiments because they will allow resistance to the host bacterium once it has incorporated your desired gene, and in this way you can select it easily. Okay, so this is the function of marker gene. Now another thing here to be considered is cloning sites, children. So what is cloning sites? The cloning sites are nothing but the sites where actually you are introducing your desired gene. Okay, so presence of more than one recognition site within a vector will generate several fragments. What are these actually? As I said you, they are the site where you are introducing the desired gene. How you are going to do that? Actually, they are the recognition sites for the common restriction endonucleases. That means actually they are the sites where you can cut the plasmid or you can cut open the vector, in other words. Okay, and then introduce your desired DNA. So actually, as I said you, more than one cloning sites if you take, okay, when there are presence of more than one recognition sites for the same restriction enzyme, then your vector will be cut open and your vector will generate many fragments. Actually, this is not a desirable thing, as we all know. Okay, so what is the preferred thing is a single vector should have a single cloning site for single restriction endonuclease. That means for EcoR1 there must be one site, for PUV1 one site, like BAM-H1 one site. If you have multiple sites for the same enzyme, multiple fragments will generate, which is not desirable. I hope you are understanding. So the ligation of foreign DNA is carried out at a restriction site present in one of the two antibiotic resistant genes. So, and usually cloning sites are preferred within the selectable marker. Okay, so here in this diagram you can see the structure of a E. coli cloning vector, that is PBR322, children. And you can see very clearly PBR322 has got two selectable markers. One is the ampicillin resistant gene and another one is a tetracycline resistant gene here. And one another thing to be noted is within the tetracycline resistant gene there are two restriction sites, BAM-H1 and SAL1, and similarly for ampicillin resistant two sites you can see. There are restriction sites even outside the marker genes also, like EcoR1, HindE3, etc., etc. So, and there is a specific ORI definitely which controls the start of replication or beginning of replication. There is a region called as ROP which is coding for the proteins involved in replication of plasmid. So this is one of the earliest constructed plasmids. Okay, PBR322. PBR, as you all know, plasmid of Bolivar and Rodrigues. So scientist name who have constructed them. Artificial plasmid it is. It is not a natural one. Okay, and this is widely used in genetic engineering experiments. Of course, apart from that, there are other plasmids also which are artificially constructed and used. Okay, till date. Now how you are going to screen, that is also one concept, children, and that concept is called as insertional inactivation. Okay, so what is insertional inactivation? Very simple. I hope you all remember also what you have studied. Suppose there are two markers. Suppose if I introduce the desired gene here within the tetracycline resistant region using BAM-H1 enzyme, I can cut open the plasmid here, okay, and introduce my desired DNA here, and then I can send the rDNA in the host cell. When I send into the host cell, the host cell is able to grow only on ampicillin medium, not on tetracycline medium. Why? Because ampicillin gene is intact, children. I have not disturbed it, whereas I have disturbed the tetracycline region, the gene, by introducing my desired DNA. So definitely tetracycline resistant gene is inactivated and it is not able to provide any resistance to the host bacterium. That's why the bacteria will be sensitive to tetracycline and resistant to ampicillin, and this you are doing by simple experiments by growing the cells on two different medium. I hope you are understanding. You can recall what you have studied. Okay, you have to first grow on ampicillin medium. Whoever grows on ampicillin medium, you have to collect them and further grow on tetracycline medium, and whoever do not grow on tetracycline medium are your recombinants. Whoever grow on tetracycline medium, also they are non-recombinants. I hope you have understood. They are non-recombinant. So your desired organism must be resistant only to ampicillin, not to tetracycline. I hope one example I have given. Okay, this is called as insertional inactivation. Similarly, there is another method also, because with PBR, if you do this two-step screening, you have to do children. It takes a long time, first growing on ampicillin medium, then again checking on tetracycline. It's a what do you say, time consuming or a lengthy process, you can say. So to avoid this problem, we have one more method that is called as insertional inactivation by blue white screening method. Okay, so what is that blue white screening method? In this method, you are making use of a chromogenic substrate. Very important, chromogenic substrate. So what is chromogenic substrate, children? A substrate that generates a colored product. It's called as chromogenic substrate. So you are using a different plasmid here actually, which is not mentioned in your textbook NCRT, but I hope you all know you are using another plasmid, that is PUC. PUC vector, set of PUC vectors you can use here. Okay, PUC, plasmid University of California. I hope you can remember. So in that there will be a region that is called as LAGZ region, which acts as a marker. Okay, and that LAGZ gene encodes for the enzyme beta galactosidase. What you have studied in lacoperon, the same LAGZ gene is used there and coding for this enzyme beta galactosidase, and beta galactosidase can act on that chromogenic substrate to produce a blue colored product. So when you introduce the desired gene in the LAGZ region, LAGZ will be inactivated, children, and beta galactosidase is not produced. I hope you are listening to me carefully. When you introduce the desired gene in the LAGZ region, LAGZ gene is inactivated and hence beta galactosidase enzyme is not produced. And when it is not produced, it cannot cleave the substrate into blue colored product. So the colonies will remain white in color. Whereas if the LAGZ gene is active, it produces beta galactosidase and hence it produces blue colored product. So whichever colonies are blue in color, okay, they will be non-recombinant. When this all will happen? When you have introduced your desired gene in LAGZ region. I repeat, when you introduce your desired gene in LAGZ region, LAGZ will be inactivated and hence colonies will be white in color. When suppose if the plasmid has not taken up your desired gene, LAGZ will be active, colonies will be blue. That is the reason what you have to conclude is blue colored colonies are non-recombinants and white color colonies are recombinant. Very important. Last statement, we can differentiate recombinant and non-recombinant colonies. Who are the recombinants? White. Who are the non-recombinants? Blue. So this is also one way of insertional inactivation. Now moving ahead, we have to understand vectors for cloning in plants and animals, children. So in plants we have a specific vector that is called as Ti plasmid. Okay, and what is this Ti? Ti is for tumor inducing plasmid. And where is it present? It is present in a soil bacterium, that is agrobacterium tumefaciens. And this basically naturally is a pathogen of dicots. It lives in soil and it causes a disease. Okay, it causes tumors actually. Basically, in other words, I can say this bacterium is one, it's a pathogenic bacterium. Okay, and it is converting normal cells into cancerous cells. You have to understand, it converts normal cells into cancerous cells because of the presence of this plasmid, Ti plasmid, natural plasmid. Now you can use this Ti plasmid as a vector. How you are going to do that is, this in Ti plasmid there is a piece of DNA that is called as tDNA. T for transfer here, children. Okay, and this tDNA is very dangerous. This actually is responsible to transform normal cells into tumorous cells. Very important, normal cells into tumorous cell, and hence the disease that is formed, that is caused, is called crown gall disease. I hope you can recall crown gall disease in dicots. Okay, because of this Ti plasmid which has tDNA. Now what we do is we remove the tDNA from the Ti plasmid, and in place of tDNA we insert our desired DNA. I hope you have heard, we remove the tDNA and in place of tDNA we insert the desired DNA and then transform into the host cell. Okay, and then the host cell will definitely have this particular desired DNA what you have introduced. Okay, so this, in other words, I can say Ti plasmid will be modified into cloning vector, and henceforth it will be no more pathogenic to the host plant. And even you should know, apart from this Ti plasmid, other vectors if you want to speak, in plants also there are other vectors like cauliflower mosaic virus vectors. Okay, then you have Gemini viruses you can use here. Okay, tomato mosaic virus vectors, like that. There are various vectors you can use. In animals we have retroviruses which are commonly used as cloning vectors in animal host cells. Okay, Now coming to the next part, that is competent host actually, children. So what is a host? A host is one which accepts your rDNA, maintains your rDNA, and transfers your rDNA to the progeny. That is host. Okay, so we know that how you are going to transfer. There is a problem here with DNA. If you remember, DNA is a hydrophilic molecule and it cannot easily pass through the cell membrane. Okay, we all know that is the nature of the membrane, which does not allow hydrophilic molecules. Okay, now how you are going to do that is, we have a method that is called as competent method. In competent method, you are going for chemical treatment with divalent cations, particularly calcium. Okay, and this calcium ions will increase the efficiency with which the DNA enters the bacterium through pores in its cell wall. Okay, important. There will be there will be pores through which the DNA enters into the cell. Okay, pores will be in the cell wall. And how you are going to perform this experiment is, rDNA is forced into such cells by incubating the cells with rDNA on ice, followed by placing them at briefly at temperature of 42 degrees Celsius. That is called as heat shock. You are giving a heat shock, okay, around 42 degrees Celsius. Okay, and then you are putting them back on the ice. I hope you have understood what did I say. First you are treating it with divalent cations, okay, that's calcium ions, okay, to make pores in the this one, okay, cell walls. Okay, then afterwards you are giving a heat shock at around 42 degrees Celsius, and immediately you are placing them back on ice. And this why you are placing them back on ice means the pores should close down, children, after entry of the DNA. So this enables the bacteria to take up the recombinant DNA. In the next method, that is microinjection method, rDNA is directly injected into the nucleus of the cells, animal cells particularly. Okay, this method is only for animal cells, okay, and not applicable for plant cells because of the presence of cell wall. And you are using a micropipette or a micro syringe. Okay, method is very time consuming, okay, slow process, and only a major success you can find in this method using oocytes. Okay, when you want to introduce the desired gene in the gametes like oocytes, there it is highly successful. Now another method we have, that is biolistics or the gene gun method. In gene gun method, the main purpose is, it has been developed to introduce rDNA mainly into plant cell because we have cell wall problem there. And this method is very efficient for plants. And this method you use a gene or particle gun or a biolistic apparatus. In this, microscopic particles of particularly of metals like gold or tungsten are coated with the DNA of interest, and they are then bombarded into the host cell. So this is one method. With high velocity, these microparticles are bombarded into the host cell, called as, method is called as gene gun. Last method we have disarmed pathogen vector. In disarmed pathogen vector, as I said you earlier, nothing but usage of this TI plasmid or even usage of retroviruses where the pathogenic genes are removed. Hence, this method is called disarmed pathogen. Pathogen is disarmed. Okay, it is no more able to cause the disease, and its purpose is only to transfer the desired gene. So these are the various methods, children. Now coming to the process of rDNA technology, we have different steps here. Isolation of DNA, fragmentation of DNA by REN, isolation of desired DNA fragment, okay, from by this one, what do you say, agarose gel, ligation of DNA into vector, transforming into host cell, culturing the host cell in medium at a large scale, and lastly extraction of the desirable product. So these are the methods. Coming to the isolation of genetic material DNA, how you are going to isolate? Your source can be anything, like it may be a plant, animal, bacteria, fungi, etc., etc. Depending upon that, you have to use different enzymes, children. Like for example, some enzymes like lysozyme can be used when you want to extract from bacteria. Like you can use cellulase when you want to extract from plant cells, chitinase when your source is fungus, like that, like that. So after using this set of enzymes, you have to isolate the various macromolecules like RNA, proteins, carbohydrates, and even lipids also. And then you have to further subject it to proteases, RNases, etc., and get rid of all the contaminants. And lastly, you are left out with the DNA molecule, that is macromolecule. And then how you are going to confirm that DNA has been extracted, and this will be done by using ultimately chilled ethanol. Okay, chilled ethanol, last step you are using at the last step you are using chilled ethanol because ethanol ultimately precipitates the DNA molecule, and DNA will be precipitating out in the form of cotton, woolly, and when you touch it with a loop, it comes out in the form of like white cotton threads, okay, fine threads in the form of suspension. And that chilled ethanol is also used. There is one reason you all must be knowing, because I have said it many times. Okay, chilled ethanol is used because DNA is freely soluble in water because hydrophilic, whereas ethanol does not usually dissolve DNA. Okay, so there is a concept like dissolves like that. So ethanol does not dissolve, and hence DNA is precipitated out in the form of fine threads. So this is one method. Okay, after isolating the DNA, you have to cut it with at a specific location with REN. You know that already I have explained. After cutting it with at a specific location, you can separate the fragments by a gross gel electrophoresis. Okay, once you separate, then from there you have to cut out, or take out the gene of interest from that particular mixture. Okay, so once you take out your gene of interest, the next step would be amplification of that gene. So what is amplification, children? Amplification is nothing but making multiple copies of the desired gene or gene of interest. An in vitro method is followed here. Okay, and that in vitro method is called as PCR, that is nothing but polymerase chain reaction. What is this polymerase chain reaction? This is a technique, okay, which was developed by Carey Mullis actually in the year 1985. You just remember, polymerase chain reaction is nothing but making copies of gene of interest by using certain requirements. What are those? Compulsorily you should have set of primers, you should have the enzyme polymerase, and you should have the desired DNA. And when you have all this, and definitely substrates for polymerization like DNTPs, magnesium ions, these things should be used. Basic thing what you have to remember is this repeated amplification is done by use of thermostable DNA polymerase, which is isolated from Thermus aquaticus, called as Taq polymerase. Okay, and the speciality of this enzyme, as we know, it remains active at a high temperature. Okay, and why high temperature? Because in PCR, if you just remember, there are three steps, children. There are three steps in PCR. First one is called as denaturation. Second one is called as annealing. Third one is called as primer extension. Okay, denaturation, annealing, primer extension. In denaturation, heat is used. How the two strands? Suppose, look at the diagram, please. This is your desired DNA. Okay, now you want to amplify this part, which is shown in red color. Okay, what you want to do is, first you have to separate the two strands. Principle of semi-conservate replication, where both the strands should act as template. Okay, so this is a basic principle of replication. Same thing we are doing in test tube in vitro condition. Okay, using enzyme. So now you have to separate these two strands by using heat. That process called denaturation. Temperature will be around 92 degrees Celsius here. Okay, so now after denaturation, once the two strands are separated here, the thing is you have to add primers. Very important. Okay, and that process is called annealing, children. And if you think why primers are added because any polymerase, if you take, they cannot start synthesis on their own. They require a primer. They require actually free 3' OH groups. DNA polymerases, they require this 3' free OH group. Okay, so these are required, so you have to add primers. And from where these primers are brought? Primers will be designed based on the sequence of your desired gene. That means you may not have the entire sequence of the desired gene. At least you should have some sequence at the ends, children. At least this is one basic requirement of PCR. Without that, you can't think of PCR actually. Okay, so you should have the knowledge about the at least ends sequence, about the knowledge about the sequence at the ends. When you have that, you can design primers and allow them to anneal. Process called annealing. And annealing is done at different temperature. Okay, it can be around 45-50 degrees Celsius. Usually it depends again upon the ATGC content, children. Okay, so once you do that, then you should allow the primers to extend. It's called primer extension, and this extension is done by thermostable polymerase, that is Taq polymerase, using DNTPs as substrate. Okay, and temperature will be around 72 degrees Celsius here. Okay, and once this is done, you can see from one double stranded DNA, you will get two daughter DNA molecules here for one cycle. Similarly, you can go for 25 to 30 cycles, and you can amplify the DNA to approximately 1 billion copies. This is how you are making multiple copies or amplifying your gene of interest. Once you do that, you can insert the RDNA into host cell. How? Already we have discussed. You can go for competence method, you can go for micro injection, you can go for what do you say, biolistic, etc., etc. And after doing that, you have to screen using marker genes, that is already discussed again. using selectable marker genes like ampicillin resistant genes, etc. And once you screen, you have to go for obtaining the foreign gene product. Okay, so how you are going to obtain the foreign gene product? This can be obtained with the help of containers which are called as bioreactors or fermenters. Okay, and the protein what you get after obtaining that protein is called as recombinant protein. Okay, and that recombinant protein is obtained from bioreactor. What is this bioreactor? Bioreactor is nothing but it is a large vessel, children, actually, which provides optimum conditions for the synthesis of various biomolecules or desirable proteins. Okay, and these are the large containers which can hold 100 to 1000 liters of culture. Okay, and lot of culture can be processed, and these bioreactors in which raw materials will be basically converted into specific products are of different designs. Okay, and they have suitable what do you say, inlets and outlets. I'll come to that. Yes, you can see the diagram here of two different types. One is the simple stir tank bioreactor, another one is the sparged stir tank bioreactor. As I was telling, there are different inlets and outlets. You can see acid, base, steam for sterilization. There is a motor. Okay, and there is an anti-foam pump or foam breaker will be there. Impellers will be there, which keeps the liquid culture in movement for proper homogenization, aeration, etc. This is the culture broth. Sterile air will be injected here. Okay, for the aerobic organisms, etc. So these are all things you have learned, children, and these ultimately provide the optimized environment inside the container for the maximum growth of recombinant cells. Okay, so once this is done, okay, then after providing a proper timing or incubation period, then you can go for what do you say, extraction of the desired material. Okay, and after extracting, we have the last step here, that is nothing but downstream processing. So what is this downstream processing, children? Downstream processing is nothing but these processes include various steps like separation, purification, which are collectively referred to as downstream processing. And how you are going to separate, purify, there are different methods like precipitation you take, centrifugation you take, or filtration you take. Okay, like that we have different methods, and even this include addition of certain preservative formulations, designing of the product. And if it suppose if it is a vaccine or any drug, lot of clinical trials have to be done on that. And a quality control testing must be carried out for different products, which is very must thing. And ultimately after quality testing only the product will be allowed to undergo marketing. So these are the different steps which are involved in downstream processing, children. Okay, so with this we could highlight the important things in this particular chapter. I hope you have like just recalled some important concept in this chapter. Okay, and with this you can refresh the things here, important concepts in this chapter, and go for your writing test. Thank you.